Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to get complex stories unpacked, peeling back those layers to find the core insights.
That's right.
And today, we're digging into a case that's just profoundly heartbreaking and, frankly, deeply perplexing. It's a story of unimaginable neglect, a tragedy hidden in plain sight, and also, somehow, about the quiet resilience of children.
Absolutely. It's almost hard to comprehend.
Yeah, this isn't really about just one single event, is it? It's more like years of circumstances unfolding leading up to this discovery that it's almost unbelievable.
Right.
So we're going to unpack the timeline, the really shocking details that came out in court, and then those bigger systemic questions that a case like this just forces you to ask.
Exactly. And what's really critical here, I think, is seeing how all these different threads, the family dynamics, community oversight or lack thereof, and how institutions responded, how they all kind of converged to create this just devastating situation.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to help you, the listener, understand not just what happened, but maybe get a handle on why it matters and where those crucial points were.
Right. The points where maybe intervention could have happened.
Yeah, where it might have changed everything, saved a life, maybe spared these kids years of suffering.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this.
Yeah.
The core of the story really bursts into the open with this one phone call, a really frantic call after almost a year of silence.
Unimaginable isolation.
Totally. You have to imagine the courage it took. It's Sunday, October 24th, 2021, Houston, Texas.
Okay.
A 15-year-old boy, he's clearly reached his breaking point, picks up the phone, dials 911.
Wow, 15.
Yeah. And what he tells the dispatcher is just chillingly direct. He says his 8-year-old brother, Kendrick Lee, had been dead for a year in the apartment where he and his two younger brothers, they were about 10 and 7 then,
Oh my God.
had been living completely alone.
Alone with their brother's remains.
Yes. And before he even made that call, he had actually texted his mother, Gloria Williams, just this desperate message saying he could not take it anymore.
That is, the weight on that kid. Can you even imagine the courage to finally make that call?
It's incredible, just pure survival instinct, maybe, a testament to something deep down.
Yeah. So that 911 call,
Yeah.
obviously that sets off major alarms.
Instantly. Harris County Sheriff's deputies head over to this second-floor apartment. And the scene they walk into, even for seasoned officers, it's unforgettable.
I bet.
Deputy Corey Castro, one of the first ones in, he immediately notes this very distinct, overwhelming smell.
Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
That smell would tell you something was terribly wrong right away.
Exactly. Before they even saw the full picture. And the conditions inside, they weren't just bad, they were catastrophic.
How so?
Like almost no furniture, no lights working, the electricity was off.
No power.
No power. Investigators said there were roaches everywhere, just crawling all over. The kids had no actual beds to sleep on. Just a few dirty blankets, barely anything to cover up with, just absolute squalor, total deprivation. The apartment itself was like a silent witness.
It paints such a grim picture already.
Yeah.
Just unimaginable neglect.
And then they find him in one of the bedrooms, partly covered by just a thin blue blanket.
Oh, no.
The skeletal remains of 8-year-old Kendrick Lee.
Skeletal after a year.
Yeah. Prosecutors later actually played the body cam footage in court, showing the deputies pulling back that blanket, exposing the reality.
That must have been incredibly difficult to watch for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And like you said, the horror didn't stop with Kendrick. The 3 surviving brothers, they were alive, but clearly severely malnourished.
Yeah, you'd expect that after so long alone.
And investigators saw visible injuries on them, too, fresh injuries, suggesting ongoing abuse.
Even after Kendrick.
Apparently so. One of the boys, the 10-year-old, had a jaw that was so badly swollen, it needed complex surgery later on.
This just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
What about the officers? How did they react?
Yeah. You could tell it hit them hard. Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who's seen a lot, he said publicly he'd never seen anything like it, called it heartbreaking.
I can believe that.
And the deputies who first made contact, John Craig and Corey Castro, they described the boys having this fear in their eyes.
Yeah, of course they would. Deeply ingrained fear.
But also, amidst that fear, they apparently expressed this huge relief. They even, hugged the investigators who found them.
Wow. Just desperate for any kind of safety, any connection after all that time.
Yeah. That hug just says so much, doesn't it?
It really does. It speaks volumes about the isolation, the trauma, not just physical, but the deep psychological scars. The fact that experienced investigators were so shaken tells you how extreme this was.
Right. It wasn't just a crime scene, it felt like evidence of a total breakdown. Every system failed these kids.
And this initial discovery, horrific as it was really just the beginning of uncovering the full story, wasn't it?
Exactly. Just the tip of the iceberg. It hinted at this long, dark history. #Dime2. Unpacking the timeline of neglect and cruelty.
So that discovery in October 2021, that was the end point, or the reveal point. But the tragedy itself started much earlier.
Much earlier. We have to go back nearly a year before that. Back to November 2020. That's when things took the darkest turn.
Okay. And this is where Brian Coulter comes in, the mother's boyfriend.
That's right. Brian Coulter. He's identified as the primary perpetrator in Kendrick's passing, and the details, they're brutal. They came out mainly through the siblings' testimony later.
The other boys testified. How old were they then?
They were older by the time of the trial, but at the time Kendrick passed, they were around 10 and 7, besides the eldest who was 14 turning 15. They recounted how Coulter just relentlessly beat 8-year-old Kendrick, kicking him, punching him, over and over.
God. Just savage.
Yeah, until Kendrick stopped moving. His eyes turned black from the beating. One of the brothers, the 10-year-old, was actually in the room and saw it happen.
Witnessed the whole thing. At that age. That's traumatizing beyond words.
Isn't it? And later testimony revealed Coulter didn't just use his fists. He apparently used the kids' toys to beat Kendrick, like a Spider-Man figure, a model jet.
To use their toys. That adds another layer of just sickening cruelty.
It's depraved, and after the beating, after Kendrick was unresponsive, Coulter just put that blue blanket over him.
Just covered him up like it was nothing.
Yeah. And the mother, Gloria Williams, she wasn't ignorant of this. She admitted she saw parts of the beating.
She saw it.
Parts of it, yes. And she admitted that the next day she found Kendrick under the blanket, knew he had passed away.
And what did she do?
Nothing. She didn't call 911, didn't call for help, didn't report it.
And why not? What was her reason?
She claimed Coulter told her not to, and she said she was afraid. Afraid her other kids would be taken by CPS, afraid she'd go to jail.
Afraid of those things, but not afraid of what Coulter had done or what might happen next. That reasoning, it just doesn't track, does it?
It's hard to reconcile. And then there were text messages. Investigators found texts between her and Coulter.
Oh, what did they say?
Chilling stuff. Williams texted Coulter saying Kendrick looked dead. She asked Coulter to clean him up.
Clean him up, not get help.
No. And Coulter's response, he texted back that it was in God's hands and told her not to worry.
Not to worry. The callousness is just staggering. That paints a picture of definite complicity, doesn't it? Shared knowledge, deliberate concealment.
Absolutely. Prioritizing themselves over Kendrick's life or even just his dignity in death.
Okay, so Kendrick passes away in November 2020. They cover it up. What happens next?
Well, here's a really strange, almost unbelievable detail. Just days after Kendrick passed, November 23rd, 2020, Brian Coulter gets arrested.
Arrested? For what? Did someone find out?
No, completely unrelated, or seemingly unrelated. He was arrested way over in Lowling, Texas, like 140 miles away for unlawful possession of a weapon.
He was arrested for a gun charge just days later.
Yes. And guess who was with him when he got arrested?
Let me guess. Gloria Williams.
Bingo. Gloria Williams was with him. He bonded out a few days later, November 29th.
Wow. So he was actually in police custody mere days after killing Kendrick.
Exactly. Physically in the system. But the connection wasn't made. The tragedy in Houston remained completely hidden.
That's a huge missed opportunity right there.
Yeah.
It just highlights how fragmented information can be. Different place, different charge.
Yeah.
No one puts it together.
It's chilling, that window. He was right there.
Oh.
But nobody knew the full horror.
It really underscores the challenge. Unless someone explicitly reports the major crime, these other smaller flags might not trigger the right alarm system-wide, and it shows how determined they were to keep it secret.
Absolutely. So Coulter's out by the end of November 2020, and then the abandonment.
When did they actually leave the boys alone?
It was months later, actually. In March 2021, Coulter and Williams moved out of that apartment.
Moved out and just left the 3 surviving boys.
And Kendrick's remains.
Alone.
Completely alone. In that apartment on Greencrest Drive, they moved to another apartment just 15, 20 minutes away.
So close. They were living nearby while their children were abandoned in those conditions.
Yes. Williams claimed she'd, check on them, said she came by every couple of minutes, dropped off some food.
Some food? For 3 growing boys living alone with that,
yeah,
that's barely anything.
It's grossly inadequate. But investigators found out something even worse. During those supposed check-in visits,
yeah,
Coulter would often come back with her, and he would beat the younger boys.
Wait, what? He'd come back to the apartment they abandoned just to abuse the kids who were still trapped there.
That's what the investigation revealed. The violence didn't stop just because they moved out.
That's a level of cruelty I can barely process. It wasn't just neglect, it was continued active terror.
Exactly. So these kids are starving, living in filth, in the dark soon enough, with their brother's body, and still being subjected to beatings by the people who are meant to protect them.
And living in constant fear, knowing he might show up anytime. The text messages you mentioned earlier, where she said he looked dead, and he said not to worry, it fits this pattern of cold calculation.
It really does, and things got even worse as time went on. By September or October 2021, right before that 911 call, the electricity got cut off, so now they're in total darkness, too.
Oh, God. Complete darkness, filth, decay, starvation, fear, and the constant presence of their brother's remains. The psychological damage, it's unimaginable, especially for the oldest, carrying that burden, #tag3, systemic failures and missed opportunities.
Which, it just begs that question, doesn't it? How did this go on for so long? Almost a whole year of abandonment on top of everything else.
Right. With all that was happening, how did nobody step in?
Well, the investigation showed there were warning signs over the years, multiple red flags, really, but for various reasons, they just didn't lead to a decisive intervention.
Okay, like what? Let's start with CPS. Was there any history there?
Oh, yes. A significant history. The family had contact with Child Protective Services going all the way back to 2015.
Okay. So they were on the radar.
Definitely. A 12-page CPS report detailed 9 separate investigations into the family between 2015 and 2020.
9 investigations. That's a lot. What came of them?
That's the shocking part. Out of those 9 probes, only 2 allegations were ever officially confirmed by CPS.
Only 2. What were they?
The first was back in 2015. Physical abuse by an ex-boyfriend of the mother's. Left marks and bruises on a child.
Okay, that's serious.
And the second was in 2020, not long before Kendrick passed. It was confirmed as medical neglectful supervision. Apparently, one of the kids had threatened suicide and attacked police officers during a crisis call.
Wow. So clear signs of physical abuse and severe mental health supervision issues, but only 2 confirmed out of 9.
Right. It really makes you question the system's effectiveness, doesn't it? How could 9 investigations not uncover the deeper pattern here?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It points to maybe challenges in gathering enough evidence, maybe high caseloads, maybe difficulty seeing the whole picture over time, or parents getting good at hiding things.
Could be all of those.
But it shows that even with repeated contact, the system didn't fully intercept this escalating crisis. There's a gap somewhere between reporting and sustained effective intervention, especially in complex hidden cases.
Yeah. And it wasn't just CPS. The school system had contact, too.
Oh. How are they involved?
The local district, Alief ISD, confirmed they'd filed truancy papers against Gloria Williams in 2019 and 2020 because 2 of the kids just weren't showing up for school.
Truancy. Okay, so the school knew they weren't attending?
Right. The kids were last actually enrolled in May 2020, and the school district even tried a home visit in September 2020.
Did they make contact?
No. Nobody answered the door.
Another missed chance.
Yeah.
Just narrowly missed seeing what was happening inside.
Exactly. And Deputy Craig, one of the investigators, he pointed out something really important about the timing.
What was that?
COVID-19. The pandemic meant lots of kids were doing virtual school.
Ah, right. Remote learning.
Yeah. And Craig's point was stark. No one was looking at that child that had bruises the next day at school or the kid with the busted lip. That daily in-person check by teachers, counselors. It was gone.
That's a chillingly valid point. Schools are often the front line for spotting abuse and neglect. Teachers see kids every day.
Right. They notice changes. They notice injuries.
And virtual school created this massive blind spot. It made it so much easier for abuse happening at home to stay hidden. Those truancy filings, the unentered home visit, they were red flags, yes, but the pandemic context made follow-up and visibility incredibly difficult.
It really highlights how unexpected events can disrupt even our basic safety nets for kids.
Absolutely. It underscores the need for alternative welfare checks when normal routines, like attending school, are broken. You can't just rely on parents self-reporting during remote learning, especially in families already flagged for concern.
Okay, so we have CPS history, school truancy. What about neighbors? Did anyone nearby notice anything?
That's often the case in these situations, isn't it? People nearby sense something's off.
It seems so. Neighbors later told reporters, yeah, they noticed things weren't right. The oldest boy, the 15-year-old, would sometimes come out and ask for food.
Ask neighbors for food. Okay, that's a huge sign right there.
Huge. But he was really specific. He'd only take packaged snacks, fruit, pizza, nothing homemade. Apparently he was paranoid about being poisoned.
Poisoned? Wow. That speaks volumes about the fear and manipulation he must have been living under, that level of distrust.
It's heartbreaking. One neighbor, Erica Chapman, said she gave him food for like 6 months.
6 months? That's consistent help.
Yeah, but she said she didn't push him, didn't ask too many questions because she was afraid he'd stop coming, stop taking the food.
That's a tough spot for a neighbor to be in. Wanting to help, but not wanting to scare the child away.
Totally. And another neighbor complained for months about a bad smell, that distinct smell coming from the apartment.
The smell the deputies noticed immediately, so someone else had smelled it earlier.
Yes. And people saw Coulter and Williams coming and going sometimes. But crucially, they never saw any children with them.
Never saw the kids. Another oddity.
Right. And many of these neighbors later said they really regretted not calling the authorities. They said they didn't realize how bad it really was, didn't grasp the magnitude of the situation.
And that's the tragic part, isn't it? People see pieces, they feel uneasy, they might even help in small ways. But connecting those dots to realize the sheer horror inside, it's hard. And people hesitate to interfere.
Yeah, the fear of being wrong or making things worse.
Exactly. And the child's own paranoia, only taking certain foods, shows how victims themselves can be conditioned not to reveal the full extent or to distrust help. It raises that tough question about community responsibility and how we empower people to act on those instincts even when the picture isn't perfectly clear.
So, yeah, you piece it all together. CPS contacts, school issues, neighbors noticing strange things, multiple points where maybe something could have shifted.
But the isolation created by the abusers, combined with gaps in the system, maybe stretched resources, and the sheer difficulty of seeing inside a private home, it created this perfect storm.
Allowing this nightmare to go on for so long, costing Kendrick his life and traumatizing his brothers.
It really demonstrates how interconnected everything needs to be. Community awareness, school vigilance, robust social services to prevent these kinds of tragedies. A breakdown anywhere can have catastrophic results. #5FU. The path to justice and lingering questions.
Okay, so after that horrific discovery, the focus shifts to the legal system, trying to find some accountability, some justice.
Right. What happened with Coulter and Williams immediately after the discovery?
Well, initially it was a bit surprising. They were interviewed by police on October 25th, the day after the 911 call, and then they were released.
Released. After finding the children in that state and Kendrick's remains.
Released without charges initially, and as you can imagine, that caused immediate public outrage. People were demanding answers, criticizing the sheriff's office.
I bet. That seems counterintuitive given the circumstances.
It does. But the pressure worked. Or maybe further evidence came to light quickly. Because just 2 days later, October 26th, they were both charged and arrested.
Okay, that's faster. Where did they find them?
Get this. They were arrested outside a public library. And surveillance footage showed them inside, looking up news articles about themselves.
Wow. Not exactly showing remorse, are they?
Yeah.
More like tracking their own infamy.
Right. It speaks volumes about their mindset.
Yeah.
That detachment is just chilling.
So the swift rearrest shows the system responding, perhaps to public pressure, but also likely to consolidating the initial evidence. That library detail is quite telling, though.
Definitely. So the charges, Brian Coulter, the boyfriend, was charged with capital murder.
Capital murder, reflecting his direct role in Kendrick's death.
Exactly. Gloria Williams faced different charges. 2 counts of injury to a child for the surviving brother's injury to a child by omission, and tampering with a human corpse or evidence.
Okay, so her charges focused on the neglect, the failure to protect, and the cover-up, not directly murder.
Correct. That was a key distinction. And the medical examiner later confirmed Kendrick's passing was a homicide caused by multiple blunt force injuries or homicidal violence. That gave the official cause.
Right, the forensic proof backing up the charges, especially Coulter's. That distinction in charges between them is significant legally, showing how the prosecution viewed their different roles. Coulter as the direct aggressor, Williams as complicit through omission and action after the fact, and ongoing neglect.
Precisely. So fast forward to Brian Coulter's trial. It started in April 2024. He pleaded not guilty.
Did he have a jury trial?
No, he chose a bench trial, meaning Judge Kelly Johnson would decide his fate. No jury.
Okay, so all the evidence presented directly to the judge.
Yep. And the most powerful evidence had to be the testimony from the surviving brothers.
They testified in his trial. How old were they by then?
They were 17, 12, and 9 by then, and yes, they testified. Bravely. They detailed the abuse Kendrick suffered, how Coulter beat him for months.
Oh, that must have been harrowing for them.
Incredibly. They also testified about the beatings they endured even after Kendrick was gone, while they were alone in that apartment.
Still abusing them even then. Unbelievable.
To make it slightly less traumatic, the two younger boys testified via video link from another room.
It's a good measure. But their words must have been devastating.
Absolutely. The youngest, who was only 7 when it happened, he told the judge directly he was in the room when Coulter delivered the fatal blows. He described seeing his brother beaten with fists with those toys.
My God, that specific detail, the toys.
He described Kendrick stopping moving and Coulter covering him with the blanket. Just direct, horrifying testimony from a child.
That kind of testimony, especially from the youngest witness, is incredibly powerful. It provides that visceral, undeniable account. So what was the verdict?
Judge Johnson didn't take long. After hearing everything, she took only 20 minutes to deliberate.
20 minutes. That's fast.
Yeah. Found Brian Coulter guilty of capital murder. The sentence was automatic. Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Life without parole. A definitive outcome for his actions.
And Judge Johnson, she didn't hold back when sentencing him. She called the facts the most horrific she'd ever encountered.
I can only imagine.
And she said to Coulter, "Those children have haunted me this last week. I hope, sir, when you're in prison, those same boys that have haunted my mind haunt yours."
Wow. That's incredibly powerful. You don't often hear judges speak with that level of personal anguish. It shows just how deeply this case affected everyone involved.
It really does. So that was Coulter. What about Gloria Williams?
Right. What happened with her charges?
She took a different path. On November 12th, 2024, she accepted a plea deal.
Okay. What did she plead guilty to?
2 counts of injury to a child. And as part of that deal, she requested something specific.
How was that?
That the children would not have to testify again, spared them going through it all a second time in her trial.
That's actually significant. Acknowledging their trauma, perhaps?
Maybe. The prosecution agreed to it. Her sentence was 50 years in prison.
50 years?
Yeah.
Is there parole eligibility?
Yes. Under Texas law, she'll be eligible for parole after serving half her sentence, so 25 years.
Okay. So, a long time, but not life without parole like Coulter. Reflects the difference in charges.
Right. And the prosecutor, Edward Applebaum, had a really interesting take on her plea deal.
What did he say?
He said, "By pleading guilty and waiving the right to a jury trial, the defendant finally acted like a protective mother. For one day of her children's lives, she was a good mother."
Wow. That's quite a statement. Provocative. Framing that one act against years of the opposite.
Exactly. It really highlights the tragedy, doesn't it? That this was considered her one act of being a good mother.
It does. It's a stark commentary. So, justice, in a legal sense, has been served for the adults. But what about the children, the survivors?
That's the crucial ongoing part, isn't it? The 3 brothers are still together, which is so important.
Thank goodness. Keeping them together must be paramount. Where are they?
They're in foster care. And they are receiving consistent therapy and counseling.
Essential. Absolutely essential for healing after everything they endured.
Yeah. So thinking about this whole case, what does it all mean? It exposes such darkness, such depravity, but also these huge cracks in the systems designed to protect kids.
Definitely. And the fact that brothers are together and getting support is at least a sign that efforts are being made now to help them rebuild. Their resilience is incredible, starting with that first 911 call.
Incredible resilience.
But their journey is just beginning. This deep dive shows not only the horrific actions of individuals, but also the complexities of oversight, community responsibility, and how easily the most vulnerable can fall through the cracks, even when there are signs. #outro.
So, yeah, this deep dive has really pulled back the curtain on a truly harrowing case. It shows how hidden suffering can be, even when there are contacts with protective systems.
The story of Kendrick Lee and his brothers, it's just a brutal reminder about the vulnerability of children.
It really is.
And it forces us to think about the impact of neglect, not just abuse, but profound neglect, and the role everyone plays, individuals, neighbors, schools, agencies, and safeguarding kids.
Right.
Maybe the aha moment here isn't just the shock of the discovery, but realizing that those small observations, those gut feelings, if people feel empowered to report them, and if systems are ready to respond properly, maybe the worst outcomes can be prevented.
That's the hope, isn't it? Which brings us to that final question for you, the listener, to think about.
Yeah.
In our own lives, our own communities, How can we get better at empowering people to speak up when they suspect something's wrong? How do we make sure our systems, our safety nets, are actually strong enough, connected enough to intervene effectively before it gets to this point?
It's a heavy question. No easy answer.
No easy answers at all. But it's one this case just demands we grapple with, something to really reflect on.